Hello everybody and welcome. I'm sorry about that weird start. Once again, the YouTube thing wouldn't let me in. It wouldn't take my stream key, and it kicked me off the broadcast and closed it. So I had to jump in there and really quickly write everything up again and schedule a new live stream. So this is it. I don't know if it booted you guys off and you went back and found it, but thank you for doing that. At least there's 2 people, 3, 4, 5 people I can talk to. Glad you made it back. This week is Microscope week. I want to talk about the whole concept of the microscope in macro photography, what it means to macro photographers. And it's something I've never done before. I haven't gone back to the real basics and talked about the microscope itself as a tool, what it is, what the parts are, what you need, what you don't need, or probably wouldn't need in macro photography, and tell you where to get them and what to pay for them, that type of thing. Then on Thursday, we're going to get into a much more technical look at microscopes, and I'm going to talk about how to use them, the various different types of lighting, the various different techniques that you'd use with different features on a microscope, and we'll get into some real detail and talk about some of the fun stuff you can do. So that's what's coming up this week. On Saturday, After Stack number 33, it is 33, and we're talking about Photoshop actions, how to make them, how to use them, what they are, that type of thing. Very interesting stuff. And if you are looking for the Photoshop action, the watercoloring one that Bud offered you guys at the last After Stack, it is now finally available on my website, on my blog post, and also in the show notes for the video After Stack 32, which I posted this week. I also posted the first recorded crystal art video. That went up today, and it's available on YouTube. If you didn't get to come, you should watch it, and next time plan on coming. It's a lot of fun. I think you'd enjoy it. And let me see, what else am I forgetting about? I posted something else. Oh yes, the Presume from this weekend is posted on Patreon. So if you're a Patreon member and you missed the meeting and would like to view it, it's over there on Patreon for your viewing pleasure. That is everything, I think. Almost. My birthday was last week, and thank you everybody that took the time to get in touch and send me good wishes. I really, it was enjoyable. I like that. Especially thanks to Laura, my friend here in Peoria, who took me out to dinner, which was absolutely delightful, thoroughly enjoyable. Thank you, Laura. And thank you also to Susan. Susan sent me 2 gifts for my birthday. One of them is this most remarkable light from Small Rig. I'm still trying to figure out, it's a macro light, rumor has it. Not exactly sure how I'm going to use it, but yeah, I'm going to watch some videos and figure it out. It's very nicely made, very nice piece of gear. But the thing that really excited me was the best photography book that I have read in years, Visually Speaking, by Ted Forbes. This is a really good book. This guy did kind of what I did. He started making YouTube videos about 5 years before I did, and has made about as many as I have, and he got famous. He did the PBS television series. What was it called? It was about photographers, and it was really good. He profiled about 6 professional photographers, and that made him famous, which is why he was able to write this book. And it is absolutely cracking. It's very good. It's exactly the kind of stuff I talk about in my photography. It's all about telling stories. This is a book you might want to get. When I've finished reading it, I'll do a review. I will also review the new light from Small Rig as soon as I've figured out how to use it. Fair enough? Okay. That is everything. That is absolutely everything I had to say by way of notes. So is it or was there one other thing? No, we'll leave it at that. This particular week of talking about microscopes began with a sheet of paper that had questions about photo micrography and microscopes in general that I'd accumulated over the last several months planning to do a video. Lots of questions from lots of different people asking. Some of the questions real basic and simple. I was able to answer them in just a few words, and some of them were very complicated. In the course of accumulating these questions and finding the best answers to all of these questions, I realized that I had at least a week of content put together. So I thought what I'd do was share with you what I have learned about microscopes as a tool for macro photographers, and just give you everything that I've come up with. I'm not trying to sell you on getting a microscope. I'm not suggesting you get one. This is really just for those people who decide at some point in the future, I'd like to try that. I'm interested in the very, very small stuff, and I'd like to give that a bash. If you're one of those people and you're watching this sometime in the future, then I hope it'll be helpful to you. If you're not, it's still going to be interesting because you'll know what we're messing around with half the time. So we're going to start out by what's the idea of a microscope? Why would anybody even think of using a microscope? We're photographers. We use cameras. Good point. We are. Cameras have a limit to just how much resolution and clarity you can get with even the best equipment. Now, people will argue about this, but it's probably, for most people, somewhere around 5 or 10x. Now, I know that I take pictures at 20 and 50x, and I think they're okay. And I know plenty of people who take them and they're fantastic, and they're not taking them with a microscope. They're taking them with a microscope objective on a rig that is basically a deconstructed microscope. But I'm going to explain the difference between those two in just a little bit. But really, the rigs that we build, the things that we make in our kitchens and our garages to take pictures of things at high magnification, start to run out of steam around 10x. Pictures start looking a bit dodgy at 20x. Microscopes are made for that. They are made to view objects that are that small. That's the idea. That's why they were invented. And the reason for that is because the systems that we use outside of the microscope are simply not precise enough to let us take advantage of all of the wonderful things the objectives and tube lenses can do. I'll talk about that in just a minute. But the idea is that a microscope is all about precision. And it really is that with the fine focus, which gives you much more precise control over your focusing than a rail can. And in addition to that, you've got a condenser that, when it's set up properly on your microscope, completely aligns the column of light so that you have even, smooth lighting. And I'm going to talk about the method you use to do that in just a minute, but that is something we don't have. We're constantly dealing with light that is bombarding our lens from all different angles and trying to deal with the fallout of that, which is often soft pictures and internal reflections from the lens that further degrades the quality of the image. Microscopes are designed around not doing that, and that's why the images at high magnification from a microscope can be significantly better than what we can do on our camera stands. Also, there is the stability of having a parfocal system, which means that you can change magnifications quickly and easily and remain in focus. It's one of the real advantages of having a good microscope is you can be on 5x or 4x and viewing your subject, and you can simply turn the turret to the 20x objective and you will be absolutely in the same place and in focus. That's parfocality, and that is not something that you can do with a camera rig. You may, yeah, you may be able to get close. I don't think so. Yeah, it would be very, very difficult, but it's something that the microscope is built to do. Also, also, when you have a microscope, and we're talking primarily about modern compound microscopes, but I'll explain that in just a second. But the microscopes are optimized for the magnification and the numeric aperture of the lens that is used at the end of the microscope. In other words, everything is perfectly tuned to work together to minimize the optical aberrations in the system for that microscope. It's like what we do is we take the objective lens, and then we take a tube lens that will be of the correct focal length, but it may well be of a different brand, and it was never engineered to be used with this particular lens. And we can get some very nice pictures from it if we tweak it just right and we get it in just the right place on our system. But the microscope is built around that whole concept, that it is always going to be in exactly the right place and exactly the right shape and size of lens to give you a fully corrected image. It's a very important distinction between the two, but knowing that when you buy a microscope, even if you buy an old microscope, you're buying one that has been engineered for that combination of numeric aperture, magnification, and it is going to produce structured and reproducible imaging every time, if it hasn't been dropped or anything like that. Microscopes used by people like us, photographers, creative people, do open up a lot of creative opportunities that are simply not there with the equipment we have. There are things that we can see and things that we can show other people in our photographs that are quite remarkable and otherwise invisible, even with our expensive setups and systems. We just have a hard time seeing them. We need to have a DIC, a kind of a contrast enhancer, or we need to have a polarized light. Well, we can cross polarize our light, but it's very tricky. It's easy to do with a microscope. It's set up for that. So there are things that we almost literally cannot see with our systems that the microscope can see easily. So not only is it a creative opportunity to do something different and exciting that we couldn't otherwise be doing, but it's also a way for us to contribute to the scientific world, because I mean, with a good microscope, you're able to do some serious work in identifying structures and cataloging features of certain species, all kinds of things that you can do. It's also great for looking at textures that you would otherwise be unable to interpret, fibers, microcrystals. There's one right there. You can't see it. It's gorgeous. That's a microcrystal that is actually growing right now under the microscope. It's got quite large, actually. So these are things that you just have a hard time looking at did you not have a microscope built for it. You can also look at weird things like emulsions which behave oddly, and patterns of rust and corrosion. All kinds of artistic microstructures that you can't otherwise see, and that is super exciting. Let me see. The easiest way for me to put it is that photomicrography. I have to remember that it's not actually photomacrography. I'll probably get in trouble for that, because I think Rick says that is the correct word. I've always thought it was photomicrography. Anyway, taking pictures through a microscope it's an addition to the experience of macro photography. It augments the experience, makes it more exciting, more meaningful, and more difficult as well. But it's exactly this that attracts, I think, most of us who end up with microscopes into this, is that it's an addition onto the world of macro photography that you just couldn't get any other way. So, as I said at the beginning, I'm not making any assumptions about where you are in the process of considering microscopy as something you want to add to your photography. It's just if you do, if it ever crosses your mind, this stuff should be helpful. There's several different kinds of microscopes. If we are going to use the term properly, then the thing that a jeweler screws into his eye, a loop, is a microscope. The loops I wore in surgery for sewing blood vessels, they would be microscopes as well, because of the simple fact that they enlarge the image and shorten the working distance. That would be a simple microscope, and we're not going to talk anything about them. The second kind of microscope is a compound microscope. That is a not simple microscope. It consists of objective lenses, like that. That's a 20x Mitutoyo in a sealed container that I can't open. There you go. That's it open. So this is a 20 times objective. It's the business end of the microscope, but it's by no means all that's in it. It also consists of a condenser, a stage, a tube lens, a tube, and some eyepieces, among other things. A light source, for example. And they can get to pretty high magnifications, and that's going to be important. There is a limit to how high the magnification can be with a light microscope, and that's because of physics, and we'll talk about that as well later on. The other kinds of microscopes you'll hear about are stereo microscopes like this, which are generally very long working distance, low magnification, but very good optics, hopefully if you get a good one. And these are fantastic for cleaning, arranging, organizing specimens for photography, especially cleaning them. I could not clean bugs without this microscope. It is vital to what I do. It's also good for assembling tiny little apparati, for doing things like propping up insects, or there's all kinds of things I use it for, taking fine bits of machinery apart, all that kind of thing. Anything that you can't see with your regular eyes, get one of these. And they're absolutely fantastic. They use reflected light. Most of them do. Some of them have some transmitted light, but most of them are made to use with light that bounces from above onto the subject. Inverted microscopes, like my microscope, I think I should show you a picture of that. Let me see if I actually have a picture before I switch the screens. Apparently not. This is problematic. I know I made one. Anyway, no, I don't. I was going to show you a picture of my microscope. You've seen it before. It's a gigantic inverted scope, and don't worry about it. It's very old. It's a bit clunky, but it still works fine. Inverted microscopes, the light passes backwards from the light actually shines through the specimen from above. The objectives are below the stage instead of above it, and your eyepieces through a bunch of mirrors are coming out the front of the microscope. The only reason you invert a microscope is if you're looking at liquids, because liquids don't do very well if they're upside down. They fall out of the container. But you can put a petri dish on top of my microscope and view it through the bottom, and the liquid will stay in there. So it's for cell cultures and other activities that involve subjects that are suspended in a liquid medium. Otherwise, they are just compound microscopes. Metallurgical microscopes, which look and behave much the same as a standard compound microscope, have one big difference, and that is that they also use reflected light. Oftentimes reflected light that comes through the objective, comes through the outside of the objective, like the BD plan mitutoyos, and then reflect back up into the viewing part of the lens. The reason is, of course, that in metallurgy, most metal is not transparent, so you can't put it on a stage and shine a light through it. So it's designed for viewing solid objects. And by the way, when we talk about our mitutoyo objectives, they're called M-plan, M-plan APO. That stands for metallurgic, and plan means flat field. So they are actually metallurgic objectives. They are made to be used with reflected light, which is how we use them, which is why they're so popular. But we'll get into reflected versus transmitted light in just a minute. Other microscopes that generally deserve their own category, I think, are microscopes that are designed to use polarized light, either simple polarization or cross-polarized light, where you have a polarizing layer over the light source, and then somewhere up above the specimen you have an analyzer, which is just another polarizer, and one of the two of those can be turned so that you can extinguish the non-polarized light. And they are fairly unique, though honestly most microscopes, research grade microscopes that you can buy, can very easily be modified to add polarization. It would be unusual if you couldn't. Most of them have modular elements that you can add. There are other kinds of specialized microscopes that are more or less very expensive. Things like DIC microscopes that have, it's a type of contrast enhancement that makes clear or translucent subjects appear really three-dimensional, lets you really see them. Fluorescence microscopes are terribly expensive because they involve so many additional pieces of equipment that need to be added to the microscope, and things like confocal microscopes that are absurdly expensive, and things that barely ever show up on the used market in any kind of reasonable price range. So that's the basic kinds of microscope. We are going to forget all about all of them except the compound microscope. That's what we're going to be talking about, because that is the other microscope that a macro photographer might want. Now let me hurry to add, every macro photographer who is doing serious insect work, who is doing work with computer chips or anything else that needs to be meticulously prepared for the best possible photograph, needs to be working with a stereo microscope. This is less an artistic extension of your camera. It is more a tool that you need to get your images as good as you possibly can. I use this to prep almost everything that I photograph, and yeah, I consider it vital. Now, I used to have a really rubbishy $100 stereo microscope made by Amscope. Cost $100, so you can imagine it was probably not terribly good. It was absolutely pants, but I got used to it and I could see things through it, so I became quite attached to it. This one is a far better microscope, and a joy to use, and I would be hard pressed to go back to the Amscope. But we won't talk about those. We've beaten that to death in other videos. But we are going to talk about the classic compound microscope. Now, I almost bought a microscope today. And when we get to talking about how you find and buy a microscope, I will tell you more about the story. But the microscope that I almost got today was a Nikon E400 stereo, I beg your pardon, compound microscope with polarizing equipment on it, and I think some DIC slots for putting in the various filters. Now, this I had found through a government surplus website, and because of the fact that I almost bought it, I lost it at the last bid. it went above my limit, and I didn't bid again, and it sold for that one click above what I was willing to pay, so I missed it. But I'm going to show you the microscope, and we're going to use that microscope for me to explain what the various parts are, for those of you who are unfamiliar. So let me try to find it, and here it is. You know, I did find my pictures of my... I'm going to do that first, actually. I'm going to show you the types of microscope that that I was just describing, just so that you can see them if you're unfamiliar. This won't take but a second. So the first microscope that we were discussing was my microscope, which is this one. This is a stereo zoom microscope by Leica in this case. Not particularly high power, but extraordinarily good optics in it. And I have a camera tube on there so I can take pictures, which I do very frequently on a daily basis. Let me see what other kind of microscopes we talked about. Somehow I have moved my folder. Hold on just a sec. There it is. So let's see. Yeah, this is my version of a microscope, and for all the reasons we discussed earlier, and I'll be going back over those. This is actually a fairly poor substitute for a microscope. It is a tube lens, in this case a camera lens, with a microscope objective on the front of it, and that microscope objective was not made to be used with this tube lens. It was made to be used with a different tube lens that is not inside this system. So as wonderful as this is, and as great as the pictures it can take are, it's not the same as microscope. Let me see. I have something that may be arguably a little closer to being a microscope. Would be this. It's a very simple setup with a 10x Nikon objective mounted on a 200 millimeter focal length relay lens right on it, with very little gap, and a bellows with which to set the proper tube length. As it happens, this is a lovely diopter lens by Nisi that does not make a particularly good relay lens, unfortunately, even mounted in reverse like it is here. So I show this just as another example of how we can try to make our own little microscopes. Sometimes it's a little easier to get good solid pictures when we build our microscope vertically, like they normally are. And this was one such apparatus that in this case actually has a high magnification Leoa lens on it, but you get the idea. It's vertical. And I think I had another. Let me see. Oh yeah, this is my baby right here. This is my microscope, which is a little on the ridiculously huge side. It's inverted, so it was made for viewing cultures and other liquid setups, but you see it does have a camera port at the bottom, and all kinds of equipment up at the lighting end of the thing. A nice condenser up here that has all of the stuff to do phase contrast microscopy, and yeah, so it's a full microscope. It has everything that I'd need. So why was I buying another one? To keep up with the Joneses, or actually to keep up with the Perrots. I really want to get into some of the stuff that Bud's doing, and I can't do it with this. Anyway, let's talk about the parts of the microscope while we're here. And I am going to begin with a picture of the microscope that I almost won in the auction today. This is the Nikon E400, and it's a middle-of-the-road research microscope. It's pretty basic. This one does have an ergonomic eyepiece setup, so we'll talk about the particular components so you know what we're talking about. This part that you look through, they are the oculars, or the eyepieces. They're usually around 10x magnification, They can be higher than that. You'll see them at 14 and 20. That's the part you look through. They usually have a diopter in one of the eyepieces so that you can tune the eyepieces to your particular malfunctioning, diseased eyes. If you have trouble reading close like I do, you need the diopter to make things visible in there. The other thing that they will often have is a reticle, a little cross wire down inside the eyepiece so that you can use it to register the location of things on the slide. But other than that, they're fairly basic. They're at the very top of the microscope tube, and it's what you look through to see your subject. Now, the heart of the system, of course, is these bad boys. These are the objective lenses. They're usually mounted on what's called a nose piece, a turret that turns. Really fancy microscopes may have 6 or 7 or more of these stations where an objective can be put in. The one I was going to get had 5, and it had 5 of these objectives. Now, it is the very core of the microscope is the objective. It is the lens where most of the correction, if not all of the correction, is done. So the color fringing is managed in here, as are the optical aberrations. So they will usually be at different magnifications depending on the purpose of the microscope. In this case, these particular microscopes come with a 5, 10, 20, 40, 60 and 100 X, and the 60 and 100X are oil immersion, meaning you need oil instead of air between the slide and the optic. There are a lot of things that I could talk about when it comes to objective lenses. For example, in addition to the magnification, they all have what's called a numeric aperture. A numeric aperture is a number that doesn't actually represent units in the real world. It corresponds to the size of the opening that the light goes through, and in that respect it has a lot of the same implications as the aperture in your camera lens, but it is extraordinarily important in determining the resolving power of the objective. The higher the numeric aperture, the wider the cone of light that is accepted into it, and the higher the resolution of the optic. Higher resolution objectives cost a lot more money. These are plan objectives. That is about as basic as you can get. A plan objective just means it is corrected for flat field, meaning it doesn't have any curvature that would make the edges of your image go out of focus. So these are plan objectives, but they are not. I don't even think these are achromats. Achromats are objectives that have corrections in 2 of the fields of the spectrum, the areas of the spectrum that represent red and blue. They are corrected in those areas, but not in the central part of the spectrum. If you want that, you need more elements in the lens. They're much more expensive, and they're called apochromatic. Apochromatic objectives are the ones you want to go after, and they are corrected across the board, so you get the least color fringing and the best performance. So that's one of the key features. Now, another important feature is the stage. The stage is where your subject goes, and most modern microscopes have tubular knobs here that you can twist. One of them moves the stage backwards and forwards, the other one moves it left and right. If you use these for any amount of time and get decent with them, you can move them at the same time and move in diagonals, and you just get used to doing that. Now, all this does is move the stage laterally. It doesn't move it up or down. The movement up and down is done with the focusing knobs on either side of the stage. I think I've got a picture that shows that a bit more clearly. Pretty sure I do. Yes, here we go. Actually shows the objectives a bit better too. These photographs were borrowed from Nikon to show the details of this lovely microscope. This is no longer made, by the way. This is now an obsolete piece of equipment. But you can see through the stage, you can see the condenser. The condenser is one of the most critical differences between a macro setup with an objective, like we like to use, and a microscope. Our setups do not have a condenser. We are using reflected light. We are shining light from the sides or the front to bounce off our subject and bounce into the objective. Here the light is being shone out of this aperture up through the condenser, which is bringing the light together into a very even column of energy, which is then shone through the subject and up into the lens. That is transmitted light as opposed to reflected light. Now, light is light, and if you can get the light to bounce up into the objective, then you will be able to see with whatever light you're able to get to do that. Of course, when you're using a slide which consists of a very thinly sliced piece of tissue, which is normally what you'd be looking at with a microscope like this, and I'm going to show you one, it's not a very good picture, but this is a micrograph, a photo micrograph of, I don't know what this is. Oh, it's a testicle, yeah. Yeah, just happened across one, and this is a very, very thin slice, only a few microns thick, and the light is shining from the other side of it, and we are looking at the light as it passes through the tissue. Obviously, the light isn't going to pass through a whole insect, and even if it did, we wouldn't want to be looking at it if it was able to get through an insect. So typically these microscopes are made for this. They are made for looking at objects with transmitted light. The metallurgical objectives that we like to use are designed to use reflected light and allow us to get a much more three-dimensional sense of our subject. You can also do this with these microscopes. It's not too much problem, especially if you're working with objectives that give you some decent working distance. These don't, by the way. The working distance on these things is very, very limited, especially as the magnification goes up. This, by the way, is the magnification. This is the numeric aperture. This is the tube length, or in the case of an infinity corrected objective like this, just the infinity mark. And then the working distance is listed right there in that dark place. It's my 10 is 10.5 millimeters, so I'm guessing that's what that one is. So the condenser, which is what we were talking about, is key to this whole business of shining light through the subject. The focusing is done by moving the stage up and down in relation to the objective and the fixed part of the microscope up here. The condenser also can be moved up and down, and needs to be moved up and down to set up the illumination in a microscope like this. But it is not generally moved up and down during observation or photography. It's moved up and down to set the microscope up for each different objective that you're using. So they are not simple devices, but they are very, very precise and beautifully engineered. This is the light source, and it can be anything from a halogen type light to a mercury vapor light, to LEDs are common these days because they're cooler, and the light actually shines in the back of the microscope, and through a series of mirrors. Let me see if I can get a picture of it for you. Through a series of mirrors, the light is directed up into the condenser. This does not show it, but use your imagination. The light source is over here on the right on the oh dear, there we are. Over here would be the light source, and it shines in, is directed up, straight up through the condenser. These silver screws you see on either side of the condenser are used to center the condenser. This is so important, and in fact we're going to take just a minute to talk about this whole concept of Koehler illumination. It's not Koehler as in C-O-L-A. That would be something completely different. It's a Koehler illumination, and it's how microscopic lighting needs to be done. The purpose is so that the light that you are getting transmitted through your subject and into your eyepieces is even, is bright, and is glare free right across the entire field. And it gives you the maximum resolution you can, it gives you the best contrast you possibly can. And hold on just a second while I change the picture. Let me see. I think the next one I have is exactly the same. No, it's a better view of the condenser. And it's also got a button there to take a picture. This is a very nice microscope, by the way. I'm sad that I didn't get it, but you can really see the workings of everything under there. Now, Koehler illumination then is a way that you can ensure that every single point on your specimen is illuminated the same way by light that is coming from all directions but equally, and that is the only way to get an image that is completely free of imperfections in the light source. So if your light source is dodgy for some reason, like you have an LED that's cheap and you can see the LED elements, or if the filament in the bulb is failing or has dark or light spots on it, you would see that if you didn't set up your microscope for Koehler illumination. So it works this way. I'm going to have to do wild hand gestures here to make this make sense. There are two image forming processes that go on within a compound microscope. There's the one we're familiar with, which is the illumination that passes through the microscope and gives us the image. You can call that I guess these are called illumination conjugates. That is the series of lenses that the light is going through and crossing over and then crossing back again, is forming images not just at the eyepieces but elsewhere in the microscope. And because there are two conjugate planes in one of these microscopes, there are two different places that you can see a formed image. That's what this boils down to. So it separates the image forming optics from the illumination optics. You think of it that way, that the light coming up through the light source in the bottom is going to have one set of conjugates. In other words, it's going to form an image somewhere different than if the light's going in the other direction, which will form an image on the subject plane and your eyes. So the illumination or the aperture conjugates, they are the following. It's the lighting source itself, like the LED or the filament in the light bulb. That's the first conjugate. The next is the condenser diaphragm. Inside here there is a let me see if I can find it. Right inside here, I don't know if you can see my pointer. Inside the condenser, right under the stage, there is an iris that you can open and close, and it is that condenser aperture, that diaphragm, that forms the second conjugate level. The third is the back focal plane of the objective, which is, we can't see it on this particular slide. I'll go back to the other one. So the third conjugate, I'm not getting the word right here. It's the plane. The conjugate plane is on the back of the objective itself. So that's for the light that's coming up. But the light that's coming down, if you could think about it that way, it's called the image conjugate. That has a lamp field diaphragm. That's this thing at the bottom, the diaphragm that is right above the light source. Then it has another conjugate plane at the specimen, and then it has the intermediate image plane, which is inside the microscope tube, and then the camera or the eyepiece image image plane, which is going to be on your retina. So that way, if you have two different ways to describe the same column of light, if there was a way that you could use one of them without having to interfere with the other one, then you could set the microscope up to be perfect in either of the conjugate systems. And that's all you're trying to do. So by focusing each optical component on its correct conjugate plane, the illumination becomes homogeneous throughout the whole microscope, and contrast is optimized. So in practice, the way, there will not be a test on this, but in practice, you just focus on a specimen at about 10x usually, specimen on the microscope on a slide, you focus on it. Then you close the field diaphragm at the bottom, and just until you see the edges of the diaphragm come into view, you adjust the condenser focus, which is the up and down movement of the condenser, until the field diaphragm becomes sharp, until basically you are aligning these conjugate planes. And once you have the illumination plane done like that, you can center the center the condenser with these two screws. One of them makes it move a bit to the left, one of them makes it move a bit to the right. Obviously, that's why the screws are on either side. And you can position the condenser absolutely in the dead center of your field. And when you do that, think about it, you reopen up the diaphragm and you get visible light coming through. You have just lined up the light for the whole microscope, so that when you look through the eyepieces, it's also going to be perfectly aligned to give you evenly lit, bright, high contrast images with no glare or hot spots. The bad news is you really have to do this every time you switch from one objective to another. You really do, because if anything goes even slightly out of whack, you can get some ugly interference and glare and all kinds of things that does not look good. Doing it this way gives you a uniform illumination across the field. It gets rid of any filament artifacts or LED artifacts. You just won't see them because of the way you've lined up the light and set the focus. You're going to maximize optical resolution and contrast, and yeah, it's just going to always be consistent and the same if you do that every time. Most people who use microscopes frequently are pretty much used to doing that. It's a pain, but you get used to it. All right, so I think we've beaten that one to death, and I won't go on any more about that. We were talking about what's our time doing. It's fleeting past. So these were the parts of the microscope. We've already covered, I think, everything: the objectives and the precision platform, condenser, diaphragm, light source, and mirror. We'll talk briefly about the various components that are on a modern compound microscope. That's a microscope like the one we're looking at here. This is definitely a modern scope, even though they don't make it anymore. So there's the Koehler illumination. This is set up to do that quickly and easily, and that is very relevant for photography. It has a trinocular head. Actually, to be honest, this one does not have a trinocular head. It's extra. You have to pay extra to get that, because if you look at the other picture, if I can find it, yeah, this one, you can see the trinocular piece goes in here. This is a special ergonomic eyepiece system, but the camera is supposed to be up here somewhere. and it apparently is not. So yeah, that is definitely one of the things that I'm going to be going on about. You have to make sure, if you are buying a microscope and plan to take pictures with it, you do need to have a hole to put the camera in. Otherwise, you won't get any pictures unless you take them through the eyepiece, which I don't recommend. So a trinocular head is a must, and almost all modern microscopes will have that. If not, built in, they'll have it as an option. You want to probably think about infinity correction. Now, this is a whole separate topic. Do you have to use an infinity corrected microscope? Of course you don't. The optics are actually just as good in a finite microscope, given everything else being equal. The infinity designation is simply so that other elements can be added between the objective and the tube lens, like fluorescence cubes, which we're going to talk about in a minute. You can add things without having to add lenses to move the focal planes up and down as you add and remove elements. That's all it is. The actual optics are probably as good if you're buying a good finite objective. So don't buy an infinity corrected microscope and infinity corrected objectives because you think they're necessarily going to give you better pictures. They're going to give you more freedom to add components, which means freedom to spend more money, and they are very much more expensive. But the reason I was looking at an infinity corrected scope is because I already have a bunch of infinity corrected objectives at the right focal length to use. I don't know if they'd even fit on this, but you get what I'm saying. So infinity correction is one of the features. You won't find anybody except maybe the entry-level microscopes making any microscopes that are finite, that just use the tube lens, the tube length, to focus the objective on the eyepiece. All right, most of these modern microscopes are also digitally integrated. They have plugins for everything. Some of them are even motorized. Now, I'm going to talk about that next time, but motorization is something that I'm going to give you a list of features on microscopes that you should be very suspicious about and very reluctant to plunge into without getting good information. But the other digital things are camera ports. They usually have HDMI outs and USB camera ports. In this case, it even has a button to take pictures, so it's basically got a built-in camera, as does my gigantic microscope over there. Other modular accessories are filter cubes, prisms for a DIC, polarizers, polarizing and analyzing layers that are inserted into the light path, fluorescence cubes, which are basically, you know what, we won't talk about them, we're out of time for that. And they're all helpful, they're all expensive, and we're going to talk next time very quickly about how to buy a microscope so that you don't have to spend your inheritance on these features that you do want to have. We talked about this a few months ago. We talked about buying microscopes at auction, and I'm gonna give you a suggested workflow for looking at microscopes and figuring out what you can afford and so on and so forth. Some good stuff. It really is good information. I would hope to get to that tonight, but we are out of time. When we get together on Thursday, I'm going to do that first. I'm going to run through my tips and tricks for buying a microscope without getting taken to the cleaners. I'll talk briefly again about the infinity microscope versus the infinity rig that we use, and in the second part I'm going to focus on photography through the microscope, what the problems are, what the opportunities are, and how to how to troubleshoot problems. We'll talk about light and how incredibly important lighting is with microscopes, and it's completely different than the kind of lighting we do with everything else. Well, not completely different, it's more difficult, but we'll talk about all of that. And then I'll go through each of the lighting techniques that you need to be familiar with, like light field, dark field, phase contrast, DIC, polarized light, oblique illumination, all of these things that you hear talked about. And I want to wrap up on Thursday with a couple of projects you might want to think about if you're new to microscopy, but also a little navel gazing about how photography really does enhance the whole macro experience, or it has for me, and I'll talk about that. So that's it. I didn't get to show all of my pictures, which is typical when I'm talking too much, but I'll find a way to show them on Thursday. So thank you very much, everybody, for coming. Let me see if anybody's still here. You know, that's the worst thing at the end of one of these, when you look up and everybody went home a while ago. Let me see. No, there's plenty of people here. Harold's here, Joseph's here. Looks totally 00S to me. Don't understand that, Joseph. The original Nikon CFI Infinity metallurgical objectives were minimally recomputed versions of the CF210 objectives. The optical quality is nearly the same. The CF160 objectives are another story. You're so clever, Joseph. You should be doing these talks, and I should just be commenting. Bud is here. Patrick is here. Patrick, oh, thank you very much. 20 congestive heart failures, CHFs, Swiss francs. Thank you, Patrick. That is very kind of you. It is much appreciated. Mike's here. Laura's here. Or Laura's actually up there, upstairs. John is here. Welcome, John. Looking to maybe get into a trinocular scope. Then come on Thursday. Julie is one of our microscopists. And Julie's husband drove through Peoria this morning. I didn't see him. Did he honk? No. Sorry about that. Okay, I think I've got everybody. Art Wagner, greetings. If I missed you, greetings to you anyway, and I will see you on Thursday. I'm sorry I ran over. This is just the way it is sometimes. And I'll see you guys on Thursday, and have a safe and pleasant week. Until then, thanks for coming. Don't miss